My boss interrupted my biggest presentation to publicly fire me in front of our most important client. He thought making me the scapegoat would save his bonus, but he didn't realize the client was watching him, not me. That mistake would cost him everything. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I was standing at the head of the mahogany table, my laser pointer resting on the projected Q3 timeline. The room was dim, smelling of expensive roast beef and stale air conditioning, filled with 30 of the industry's heaviest hitters. I was mid-sentence explaining the integration rollout for the Jensen account when the air suddenly left the room. Connor Price, the VP of Strategic Ops, and the man I had trained back when he didn't know a spreadsheet from a placemat, leaned forward. He didn't clear his throat, he didn't raise a hand. He just cut through my voice with a casual, devastating volume. "Actually, let's pause there," Connor said, smoothing his tie. "This will be Matt's last project with us." I froze, my thumb was still pressing the button on the clicker, the red laser dot trembling violently against the projection screen. For a second, my brain refused to process the words. I looked at him, expecting a punchline, a segue, anything other than what I had just heard. But Connor wasn't looking at me. He was sipping his sparkling water, looking bored, as if he were announcing a change in the lunch menu rather than ending my career. 30 executives turned their heads in unison. I felt their eyes burning into me, a mix of confusion and pity. My throat locked up so tight I couldn't swallow. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and pulled the rug out from under my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs, a deafening roar in my ears that drowned out the hum of the projector. I had half a slide left, my mouth opened but no sound came out. I was a dead man walking, standing in the spotlight. "As I was saying," Connor continued, finally glancing at me with a look of mock sympathy, "we're moving in a new strategic direction, but Matt has done adequate work getting us to this stage." Adequate, the word hung there like a foul smell. I had built this infrastructure. I had spent nights sleeping under my desk to make sure the code was clean, and now I was being gutted in public. I forced my eyes back to the screen. I couldn't storm out, I couldn't scream, not here. My voice came out steady, though it felt distant, like a recording played in another room. "As you can see," I said, forcing the words through the constriction in my throat, "the integration plan boosted profit margins by 42% in the test market." Connor smirked. He knew exactly what he had done. He had picked the one moment where I was powerless to fight back without tanking the presentation and looking unstable. He had trapped me. But Glenn Jensen, the client, the man whose trust was worth millions, wasn't looking at the screen. And he wasn't looking at Connor. He was watching me, his face unreadable, his eyes narrowing slightly. The betrayal wasn't just a firing, it was a public execution, and Connor held the axe. I wrapped up the pitch on autopilot. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was in my chair, the linen napkin heavy on my lap. My hands were sweating so profusely I had to keep them clenched under the table. Waiters moved silently around us, placing dessert plates, New York cheesecake with a raspberry drizzle. I stared at it. The sweetness in the air made me nauseous. Connor was in his element now. He was holding court at the center of the table, cracking jokes about fresh perspectives and trimming the fat. He was charming the room, or at least he thought he was. A few junior executives laughed nervously, glancing at me and then quickly away, as if failure was contagious. "Matt's moving on to exciting things," Connor said, raising his glass slightly in my direction. "We wish him the best, of course." No one laughed at that once. I didn't speak, I didn't ask questions. I wasn't about to make a scene in front of the biggest client we had, but my mind was racing, connecting dots I should have seen weeks ago. The blocked meetings, the reassigned team members, the sudden audit of my files. Connor hadn't just decided this today, this had been in the works for months. He had waited until I had finished the heavy lifting, waited until the project was a guaranteed success, and then he had shoved me off the cliff so he could catch the trophy at the bottom. I took a sip of water, my hand shaking just enough to ripple the surface. I looked at Glenn Jensen. The billionaire client was picking at his cheesecake with a fork, dissecting it rather than eating it. He hadn't said a word since Connor's Anu. "And cement," he leaned back in his chair, wiping his mouth slowly, and glanced down the long table. I braced myself. I thought he was about to stand up, shake Connor's hand, and leave. I thought this was the part where I faded into the background, a footnote in corporate history. Instead, Glenn leaned in toward me. His voice was low, barely audible over the clinking of silverware. Can we talk outside? I froze. I didn't answer out loud. I just nodded once. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor as I stood up, the sound cutting through the chatter. Every eye in the room followed me. Connor didn't move. He didn't even turn his head. He acted like it was already over, like I was just a line item being cleared off the books. He went back to his conversation, dismissing me entirely. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. He thought he had deleted me from the equation, but he didn't realize that I was the only one who knew where the bodies were buried, and I had the map memorized. I followed Glenn out through the side exit, away from the warmth of the dining room and into the cool evening air. We walked past a row of spotless black SUVs, their engines idling, until we stopped near a low stone wall overlooking the parking lot. The sky was turning a bruised purple, the sun dipping below the horizon. I took a deep breath, the first real one I'd managed in an hour. Glenn didn't waste time on pleasantries. He turned to me, his expression grave. That was the most unprofessional dismissal I have ever witnessed in 30 years of business. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He's been gunning for this for weeks, I admitted, the adrenaline finally starting to crash into exhaustion. He tried to get me to adjust our Q3 projections before the board review. He wanted the numbers to look like they were rebounding. They weren't. Glenn turned his head toward me, his face stone-faced. You refused. Of course I refused, I said, looking him in the eye. I don't fudge numbers to keep someone's bonus safe. I built this division on accuracy. If the data says we're down, we're down. He nodded slowly, as if my answer confirmed a theory he had been testing. Integrity is not exactly in style anymore, he said quietly, but I have always had a soft spot for people who stick to ugly truths. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy stock, matte black with silver lettering. No company name, just a geometric logo I didn't recognize. I chair a foundation, Glenn said. It's a private initiative. We fund ethical innovation. Startups, infrastructure projects, anti-fraud systems, things that keep the system from collapsing in on itself due to greed. I looked at the card, Trellis Foundation. I had heard the name whispered in industry circles, usually associated with massive whistleblowing cases or sudden corporate restructuring. People didn't apply to Trellis. People got tapped. We need people who will tell hard truths, Glenn said, stepping closer. And make them stick. I'm offering you a fellowship, full autonomy, better pay than what you were making in there. I stared at the pavement. I felt like I had been sucker punched twice in one day, first by Connor's malice and now by Glenn's generosity. That's when the side door burst open behind us. Connor came striding out, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his face stretched into that fake, relaxed smile he wore like cheap cologne. He looked between us, feigning surprise. Glenn, he called out as if we were just old friends catching a breath of fresh air. Didn't mean to steal your guy mid-dinner. There's just been some restructuring. Nothing personal, you understand. He walked closer, his eyes flicking to the card in my hand, then up to my face. He had the polished look of a man who had never done a day of real work in his life, perfect hair, manicured nails, and a suit that cost more than my car. He was a shark in silk. Glenn didn't even turn his body, he just angled his head slightly. You're not good at this, Connor. Connor blinked, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. I'm sorry. I said, Glenn repeated, turning slowly to face him fully, you are not good at this. You try too hard to sound in control. It makes it obvious when you're not. Connor laughed, but it sounded brittle. It sounded like it hurt. Let's not make this messy, Glenn. It's just business. You already made it messy, Glenn said flatly. Connor looked at me, his eyes cold and hard. Matt, come on. You're not going to let one awkward moment turn into some big drama, are you? Let's be adults here. Hand back the company access badge and walk away. I took a step toward him. You humiliated me in front of a client to protect your fraudulent numbers, I said, my voice low. That wasn't awkward, Connor, that was calculated. He opened his mouth to retort, to spin another lie, but Glenn raised a hand. Matt is with me now, Glenn said. I'm offering him a Trellis fellowship. We back people who know how to stand their ground against people like you. Connor froze. I watched the realization hit him like a slow fall down a flight of stairs. His arrogance cracked. You're kidding, he stammered. You're offering him a fellowship based on one project. No, Glenn said, based on how he handled being stabbed in the back during dessert. Connor's jaw tightened. He looked like he wanted to scream, to threaten, to call security, but nothing came out. He was outmatched and he knew it. He turned and walked off stiffly, his heels hitting the pavement too hard, retreating back into the safety of the restaurant. Glenn watched him go, then turned back to me. "You interested?" I looked down at the card again, my fingers curling tight around the cardstock. The anger was still there, burning in my chest, but now it had a direction. It had a purpose. "Yeah," I said, looking back at the closed door. "I'm in." The following Monday, I didn't wake up with the dread that had been my constant companion for the last year. I started at Trellis. There was no downtime, no grieving the old job, just a sleek silver laptop, a security badge, and a mission statement that didn't involve kissing anyone's ring to do the right thing. The fellowship wasn't some corporate timeout for disgraced executives. It was an arsenal. Glenn made that clear from the orientation. "We back truth-tellers," he told me, "not puppets." My salary was higher than my VP track had been, but the real currency was the autonomy. My focus was specific: projection fraud. I was tasked with investigating how companies massage numbers to feed investors short-term wins while bleeding long-term stability dry. It was the exact mechanism Connor had used to hang me out to dry, but now I had the resources to dissect it. I didn't just look at spreadsheets. I interviewed anonymous whistleblowers from across the tech sector, dug through SEC filings, and traced patterns across 5 major industries. I never named my old company in my reports. I didn't need to. The techniques were textbook. Inflated pipeline deals, deferred expenses to make the quarter look profitable, revenue padded from internal roll forwards. Anyone who worked there knew exactly what I was describing. 3 months in, our first white paper dropped. It was titled "The Illusion of Growth: How Midcap Tech Hides the Bleeding." It hit hard, quietly but hard. Glenn forwarded the report to his board of directors. He didn't say a word to me about it, but the effects were seismic. 2 weeks later, Glenn pulled 50% of his business out of my old firm. Just gone. No warning, no press release, just a massive contract termination clause exercised with prejudice. From what I heard through the grapevine, their quarterly call was a disaster. They tried plugging the financial holes with discounts and fake client renewals, but without the integration systems I had built, and which they had failed to maintain, their numbers crumbled. Internal chatter leaked out to the blogs. Morale tanked. Half my old team quit within 2 months, unwilling to work under Connor's chaotic, fear-based management style. I was sitting in my office on the 4th floor, watching the rain hit the glass walls, when I realized that for the first time in my life I wasn't just working. I was hunting. 6 months to the day after that parking lot ambush, Deanna Merritt showed up. There was no warning. She just walked into Trellis HQ like she belonged there, breezing past the reception desk with the kind of entitlement that assumes doors simply open because you are approaching them. I was reviewing a data set on a second monitor when I sensed her. I turned to see her standing in my doorway. She was wearing a designer camel coat and heels that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was immaculate, her face composed, but there was a tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Matt," she said, flashing a smile that made my stomach clench. "Got a minute?" I didn't get up, I didn't offer her a seat. "I've got 5, I said, checking my watch. She sat across from me anyway, crossing her legs and placing her clutch on my desk. She looked around the office, taking in the minimalist design, the quiet hum of productivity. "Nice setup, a bit academic for someone with your talents, isn't it?" "It's honest work," I said. "You should try it sometime." She didn't flinch. "Let's not pretend we didn't do good work together, Matt. What happened with Connor? That wasn't personal. It was strategic misalignment. We had different visions for the narrative." I laughed once, a harsh sound. "Is that what you call throwing someone under the bus in front of 30 executives? Strategic misalignment." "The board wants you back," she said, cutting to the chase. Her voice dropped an octave, losing the pleasantry. "We'd restructure around why." "Oh, senior executive title, expanded budget. You'd report directly to me, only temporarily, of course. Eventually, you'd have the COO track." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. Let me guess. The Jensen fallout finally hit the balance sheet. Connor couldn't fake the recovery, could he? She glanced out the window, then back at me. "The company needs direction, we need stability, we need real numbers, we need you to help clean this up." "And the board seat." She nodded. "You'd have a say in future oversight, total transparency. Except, of course, regarding the transition period." "So," I said slowly, "total transparency, except for the part where you and Connor keep your jobs and bonuses while I fix the mess you made." Her lips tightened into a thin line. I'm offering you a second chance to lead, Matt. Isn't that what you wanted? I stood up slowly. No, what I wanted was for people like you not to get promoted in the first place. She stood as well, smoothing her coat. You're really turning this down for a fellowship. I'm not interested in fixing one company, Deanna, I said, my voice steady. I'm fixing the system that let your company get this bad. She blinked once as if the words didn't compute in her world of transactional relationships. Then she grabbed her purse and walked out. No goodbye, no handshake. I sat there for a second, feeling the adrenaline fade. She was scared. They were bleeding, and they knew I was the one holding the scalpel. I was mid-edit on the next Trellis report when the invite came through. The annual Global Leadership Conference. It was the Super Bowl of the corporate world. Big stage, bigger audience. Every executive with a LinkedIn pulse and a budget would be there. I was slated to speak on financial transparency in emerging markets. The kicker, Connor Price, was on the schedule too. He was a panel speaker on Friday afternoon. My slot was right after his. It was a setup, I knew it, Glenn knew it, but I didn't blink. I accepted the invite within 5 minutes. 3 days before the event, I got the warning. It came to my personal encrypted email. No subject line, no sender name, just a forwarded message with my name, the time of my session, and a short note, check your files. He's coming for you. I immediately ran a full scan on the presentation deck I'd submitted to the conference system days earlier. On the surface, it looked fine, clean layout, bullet points, source links. But then I dug into the metadata and the embedded spreadsheets. My blood ran cold. They had swapped in doctored charts. The revenue curves were inverted in the raw data. Client case studies had been subtly altered to look like failures, and one slide, slide 12, claimed a partnership with a sanctioned entity that never existed. If I presented this deck, I wouldn't just look incompetent, I would look like a fraud. It was a career-ending trap, sloppy but effective if I hadn't caught it. Connor wanted to humiliate me on a global stage to prove that my integrity was just as fake as his projections. I didn't panic. I scrubbed the corrupted deck from my local drive. I rebuilt my entire presentation from scratch, verifying every single data point, and encrypted the new version onto a secure, biometrically locked USB drive. Then I created a decoy. I took the corrupted file, left the title and layout identical, but filled the speaker notes with nonsense and the data fields with obvious errors. I uploaded that back to the conference portal. Let them think they'd won. Let them come smiling to the front row, waiting for me to self-destruct. On the day of the conference, the energy was electric. I arrived early, bypassing the main check-in to head straight for the AV booth. I told the tech team I'd be using my own gear, HDMI input only, no uploads, no cloud sync. They grumbled but agreed. As I walked backstage, the air smelled of ozone and expensive cologne. That's when I saw them. Deanna was in a tailored navy blazer, looking every bit the Iron Lady. Connor was next to her in a pale gray suit that probably took a full can of hairspray to match. They were posted up near the green room, sipping complimentary espresso like they owned the building. Connor didn't even try to hide it. He spotted me and smirked, stepping into my path. "Hope you brought your best, Matt," he said, his voice dripping with false camaraderie. "Big room today, lots of cameras." I smiled, a tight, dangerous smile. Always do, Connor. "Break a leg," he said, and I knew he meant it literally. He thought I was walking to my execution. He had no idea I was the one pulling the switch. My name got called. I walked out under the blinding stage lights to polite, expectant applause. It was a packed ballroom, hundreds of decision-makers, industry analysts, and journalists. Cameras on tripods lined the back wall, their red recording lights blinking like unblinking eyes. Connor and Deanna sat dead center in the front row. They were leaning forward, anticipating the disaster. Connor actually had his phone out, ready to capture the moment I stumbled. I reached the podium, ignored the house system, and plugged in my own laptop. The screen flickered to life behind me, my real deck loaded instantly, clean data, bulletproof charts. The title card read, "Integrity as an Asset Class." I didn't even look at the tech crew who were confusedly checking their monitors. I just launched into it. "Today, we're talking about the real cost of inflated projections," I began, my voice amplified and steady. "Not just the financial fallout, but the human capital traps that get set to silence people who speak up." I moved slide to slide, crisp, direct, every statistic sourced, every example documented. 5 minutes in, I saw Connor shift in his seat. He frowned, tapping his phone screen, then looking back at the projection. He realized the sabotage hadn't loaded. The numbers on the screen were accurate. By minute 10, his face had drained to the color of the hotel bedsheets. He leaned over to Deanna, whispering frantically. She didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the screen, her expression hardening into a mask of realization. They thought they had me cornered. Instead, they were watching their trap fall apart in real time. To understand the severity, I said, let's look at a blind case study of a mid-sized tech firm that lost a major client after faking recovery data to boost investor calls. I clicked the remote. The screen filled with a timeline. It didn't name the company, but the revenue curves, the specific dates of the restructuring, and the client exit matches were unmistakable to anyone in the room who followed the industry news. The audience murmured, heads turned. A few people pointed at the screen, then glanced toward the front row. The timing was no coincidence, and they knew it. Half of them had heard the rumors already. I was just confirming them with math. The loss wasn't due to market conditions, I said, looking directly at Connor. It was due to a leadership culture that valued a comfortable lie over a difficult truth. I stepped away from the podium, letting the final slide sit on the screen. Integrity isn't loud, but it leaves a mark. Thank you. The applause hit hard and fast. It started from the back rows, the analysts and engineers, and swept forward until the whole room was standing. Glenn was somewhere in that crowd, but I didn't need to look for him. I looked straight at Connor. He clapped twice, that was it. His jaw was locked so tight it looked painful. As I walked off the stage, I passed right by him. No handshake, no words, he didn't deserve either. I barely made it into the wings of the stage before someone grabbed my arm. It was Na. I hadn't seen her in over a year. She used to be one of my top analysts before Connor gutted my team. Now she looked wired, pale, like she hadn't slept in days. We need to talk, now, she said, her eyes darting over my shoulder. I followed her down a back utility corridor, past the green room, until she yanked open a door to a supply closet. She shut the door behind us and pulled a thumb drive from her coat pocket. I've been backing things up, she said, her voice low and fast. They're scrubbing the servers, projection histories, audit trails gone, but I've got the raw files, all of it, including the fake invoices. I stared at her. What fake invoices? She shoved the drive into my hand, billing clients for work that wasn't done, overcharging on automation packages, then burying the difference in service fees. They've been doing it for years to pad the margins. Connor authorized it. I was about to ask how she got this when the door slammed open behind us. Connor. He stormed in like he owned the room, face red, eyes wild. You little traitor, he spat, reaching for Na. You think I don't know what you're doing? Let go of her, I said, stepping between them. He didn't even look at me. He grabbed Na's arm. You're done, Nina. You're fired. Lawsuit's coming. Hope your cheap lawyer likes paperwork. You don't understand, I said calmly. You already lost, Connor. You just don't see it yet. You think a speech makes you a hero, he shouted, shoving me. You're nothing. Funny, I said. I heard that same tone 6 months ago, right before you handed me a mic. Gavin, Glenn's head of security, appeared in the doorway. 2 men in suits were behind him. They didn't say a word, they just moved. Step away from her, Gavin said flatly. This is an internal matter, Connor snarled. We have it on video, Gavin cut in. All of it, the threat, the assault, and the conference live stream is still running in the hallway. Connor froze. He looked up to the corner of the ceiling where a security camera blinked red. Na yanked her arm free. She was shaking, but she stood tall. Security moved in, grabbed Connor by the arms and pulled him. Toward the door, he twisted back, screaming threats, but they dragged him out, his heels skidding on the linoleum. 5 minutes later, Gavin's phone buzzed. He showed me the screen. Judith Kenny, chair of the board, she wants to meet now. By the time we got to the hotel's private lounge, Judith was waiting. She was the Iron Lady of the board, and she looked furious, but not at me. Emergency session wrapped 10 minutes ago, she said as I sat down. We've terminated both Deanna and Connor, effective immediately. Legal reviews are underway. I leaned forward. Why call me? We need someone to stabilize the company, someone the public trusts. We want you back, Matt, as interim COO. I let that sink in. If I come back, I said, it's on my terms. I burn out every corner, total transparency, no padded projections. She nodded, that's exactly what we need. Later that afternoon, the press conference was brief. Judith announced the leadership transition. I walked out to the podium not as a victim, but as the new head of operations. I saw Deanna standing at the back of the room behind the press pool. She had been stripped of her credentials. She looked hollowed out. I caught her eye, she mouthed something, you planned this. I just shook my head. I hadn't planned their corruption, I just refused to let it bury me. 3 years later, I was named CEO. The transparency initiative I launched became the industry standard. We didn't sell lies anymore, we sold clarity and the market paid a premium for it. Sometimes I think about that dinner, the laser pointer shaking in my hand, the humiliation burning my face. Connor thought he was ending my story. He didn't realize he was just writing the prologue to his own destruction. He thought he cut me out of the picture. What he actually did was hand me the scissors.